Good evening. Calling the planning board meeting of February 7th to order. I'm the chair, Jimmy Tarr. To my right is Doug Finn. To my left is John Jeffers, Lee Bell, Janelle Franklin, and Ashton Legal, our administrative assistant. And I'm going to read something that we're supposed to have read all the time. After the chair has opened the public hearing and the clerk has read the meeting notices, time be provided for the applicant to represent to describe the project and any specific requests of the board regarding the project. What are my reading glasses? Comments from supporters of the project will be entertained. Any questions, the project will be made to the chair, who will engage the applicant as required. Comments from opponents of the project will then be entertained. Any questions on the board, any questions on the project will be made to the chair, who will engage the opponent. The public hearing will then be closed. The board will deliberate on the project during the time. Its members may ask additional questions of the applicants, supporters, or opponents. Upon completion of the deliberations, the chair will seek a motion to approve the project with or without conditions, to reject the project, or to continue the hearing to a future date with instructions to the applicant. Okay. Public forum. The public forum is open. Does anybody have anything to say that's not on the agenda? Nope. Public forum's closed. All right. Our next discussion is the open space development bylaws. You want to talk to it? You want to talk to it? Janelle?
I'll talk to it.
Okay.
Yeah, so the open space development bylaws, show of hands for people who are here because of that. Okay. So essentially we have something in our bylaws right now for open space development that allows for denser development in town on lots that is going, additionally preserving open space. We've made some changes. Some of the big changes are we're increasing the requirement from 40% of the lot to be preserved as to open space to 50%. Additionally, we have taken away minimum lot size requirements for this. We have a note that people will still have to adhere to septic requirements under Title V. Essentially, the edits from this or to this bylaw are to promote denser development in Hatfield that will allow for more affordable housing options in town, not necessarily housing for low-income families, but just more housing options overall. Does anyone want to add anything to that?
Anything to add?
I'll reserve my thoughts. I mean, there's a number of things that I could comment on.
Okay. Anybody in the audience have anything to say about this?
This is something too that would be presented at, oh, yep.
Anywhere in general, with properties?
Yep, so this would be, we would encourage this bylaw to be used on any subdivision development that was 3 or more units on a property, and that could be in the rural residential district, outlying residential district, town center district, and the agricultural district, and then not including any of those lands in Hatfield's floodplain district.
So
I was just curious, it's hard to understand it like without a hand. Do you have any handouts?
I do actually. Whoa, I forgot I was connected to the chair. I'm so sorry, John. Messing up your
would you
equipment.
also come
Thank
forward
you.
and sit up by the mic and tell us who you are?
So this half sheet.
That was my only question. Beth Giannini, I live on North Street.
So this is just a preliminary drawing that tries to visualize the change that this bylaw would make if someone were to use it. So traditionally in those first pictures up top, you can see how with like larger lot sizes of 45,000 to 6,000 square feet, how those might be dispersed on a swath of land. And then below that, you can see the same area and how having smaller lot sizes, in this photo, it's a little over 22,000 square feet per lot, how that preserves that pond area on the right. So that's the idea of this bylaw. And this is something that we will be proposing at this year's annual town meeting. Does anyone have any further questions with that?
So if anybody has any comments at the town meeting, be aware that it's going to be a vote that day on this.
And it will be because it is working towards housing, it will be a majority vote, not a 2/3 vote. Yep.
Jeff McCullough, North Street. So no frontage requirement on this? Why was the frontage requirement reduced or changed?
The frontage requirement was taken away in order to allow for more flexible design. So it's still really the main requirement for the lot size is making sure that it meets Title V requirements.
And further question, so, Hatfield's not that large of a town. Did you map out where potentially this would be applicable? Like, in other words, did you take the time to look at what parcels, to this gentleman's question, would be applicable for this? Like, could we see a map that shows us where we're talking about?
We have not done that yet.
Is that a reasonable request?
I think
You
so.
can glean it from the zoning maps.
Yeah.
The zoning maps with the flood map. You
Yeah.
got it. That's your answer.
So that's something that I can work on. Yes.
So
A map would be really helpful. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep, I can work on that.
to that question, minimum lot size in Hatfield is 40,000 square feet?
If we have 40 and change.
Is that correct?
Like
So-
1
or is
acre.
it 1 acre?
45.
44,560 square feet?
Something like that.
Okay. So 6.24 says any applicant applying for residential subdivision creating 3 or more lots are encouraged to apply for an OSD. So that would mean basically any existing lot or combination of lots in common ownership that exceeds 3 acres would be a potential candidate for an open space development.
Hmm.
So, and I think that those,
3 acres or more.
and those properties, those pieces of land are probably visible on the town zoning map.
Yeah.
I would think.
I guess the point here is that the town right now doesn't have affordable housing at all, and to try to encourage that, and given that this town has a lot of acreage, as Greg can attest, it doesn't have the frontage it needs. This is a way for the town to develop without the 200-foot constrictions that have kind of limited these sorts of things in the past. And while conserving open space at the same time.
Anybody more comments, questions? We'll move on, I suppose. You have more?
Well, just one quick question, probably to Janelle. I'm sorry. I don't mean,
No,
and forgive me if this sounds a little belligerent. I'm going to try to not make it that. I understand the benefit to the town. I understand that you want to encourage developers to do this sort of thing. So the question I have is, what's the carrot and what's the stick?
The carrot, yes. So the carrot here is allowing some density bonuses. So we have equations that people can use for like how much they can develop currently with our current bylaws, and this will allow for increased density, which is here. Hold on. Can't find it right now. But essentially increased density bonuses. And then that is supposed to make it more attractive than building a regular subdivision.
Okay.
No.
The
So-
town needs more housing, and the town has decided that the preservation of open space is a high priority.
Mhm.
Right.
This is a solution or
Mhm.
a revision to a previously
Sure.
little used bylaw. trying to encourage the adoption.
And we don't really have a stick because a regular subdivision would be allowed anyways. So we're trying to just increase the attractiveness of this option.
So to that point, and I don't mean to imply that I'm against this in any way, this makes a lot of sense to me. If there was a way to encode within this that if the planning board, and I'm just wordsmithing, if the planning board determines that an open space development is possible and practical and of greater advantage to the town, but the applicant chooses to go with a standard subdivision instead, that may be deemed a detriment in consideration of their subdivision request. If that makes, and I'm not even sure if that's possible, but
It
I mean,
goes
if
to your
it goes,
question, what's the stick?
yeah,
We can't, we wouldn't be able to deny them the subdivision just because they weren't using this increased bylaw. To my,
Language here is just we encourage.
yeah, to my knowledge, it is not something within the planning board's power to deny a subdivision application. If it meets the,
if it meets the criteria, yes.
yeah. So if a project met the criteria and we wanted to see something with more units and less sprawled out on the land that they were working with, I don't believe we have the power to say no to something if it was a 3-acre lot that only had 3 houses on it.
Or 30-acre lot, with 30 houses. on it,
Well, and
right?
that's what I'm thinking is you're looking at, if someone takes 30 acres and turns it into 12, 3.5 or 4-acre lots with absolutely no open space and no consideration, but they're planning a properly sized road and properly, laid down utilities and a homeowners association and all that. It's still, I think, within the realm of the planning board saying, well, you could have done an open space and you're using this entire piece of lot that is and has traditionally been, grade A farmland. That's a detriment, in my opinion, to that application. If they want to develop smaller lots on only half the space and permanently preserve the rest of that farmland and make it available, put it under an APR for farming or what have you, that's an advantage to the town and would be seen as more favorable.
Mhm.
Would it be enough to weigh one way or the other? No, probably not.
It remains subjective
That's the question, yeah.
Right.
Well, is it subjective?
to us when it comes. I mean,
And that's the part of an adjudicatory board. You have the ability to say, no, that's not good. That's, this is, but not, that's part of our underlying authority. If we find that a certain thing is less advantageous to the town, then that we have to take that into consideration. So I leave it at that. I don't want to derail the process. So
Seems though that if somebody were to approach this with a regular subdivision on a applicable piece of property, we would be hard pressed to say no without being sued.
Yeah, well, that's the law.
Right.
But we have this in existence, and we're proposing to amend it,
Mhm.
make it a little better, to say we encourage.
Right. It
So you
seems,
can get the same amount of units that you're looking at in your project and have a real boon to the town, the state, like the whole benefit, but we can't hold them to it. We can just encourage.
Right.
And we can refine the benefits they'll get. That's what this is about, fine tuning it.
any more discussion on this topic?
Leah Gay, Scotland Road. You say that one of the reasons why you're doing this is so it's more affordable for people to come into the town. Why is it that if you make the lot smaller, they're still going to cost the same as a 1-acre lot for somebody that's going to build?
I think that's more thinking about scarcity. So if one type of development allows for like 18 lots and the other type of development allows for 30 lots, the idea is that more option will lead to more choice and combined with other areas, not just in Hatfield, alleviating some of the pressures of the housing crisis in the Pioneer Valley. So having more option and adding to the housing stock, theoretically, lowered the price, yeah.
If you look at the drawing too, you're putting in less infrastructure. You're saving half the lot. You're running utilities for septics in a smaller area. There's just that cost. It's getting easier to build. So, will the cost be passed on to the
Yeah.
buyer by the builder? That's up to the
That's
builder.
a whole other
Right.
topic.
So more housing drives costs down. That's kind of what's behind this as well.
Good, thank you.
Anybody else? You guys good? Okay. Move on to the next discussion if we could. The next discussion is about the Hatfield Design Guidelines. Involved in this one. Is this you, Janelle?
Yes. So for the design guidelines, there's just a few changes from last time we met. So one of the questions was under, and also for people who are here, so the design guidelines is something that we are hoping to vote as a board to approve and start using in our review process. And the purpose of this is to make sure that new development is considerate of the historic character of Hatfield. And so one of the things that was changed from last time is under objectives, that last bullet. I know there was some question to really it just making sense. So right now it says preserving Hatfield's small town and historic character by protecting existing structures and promoting appropriate historical designs for new development. So if anyone has a comment on that. And then just some formatting changes. But the idea here is to ensure that new developments are not using impervious surfaces, yes, or that's favorable to the alternative, and then just creating structures that complement the existing neighborhood appeal, creating sidewalks that exist or connect to existing trail networks or sidewalk networks, and if not, starting to create those. And yeah, does anyone raise a hands here for the design guidelines discussion? No? Now that you are here and you've heard this, does anyone have anything that they would like to share for design guidelines? No. Okay.
I guess not.
Did anyone here think of additional things that they would want to add
You
to this?
captured all the stuff we went over last time.
Yeah.
What was that?
This document has everything that we discussed last
Yep.
time. Everything we read, penned up, talked about.
And then I think something that can be created as well is a checklist that goes with this.
Yeah.
For applicants, so that when
That'd be
we get a
great.
new development in, it's easy for you guys to go through and check off the things that are listed here. So,
Actually ask the applicant to check the list themselves and make
There
it
we
part of the
go.
application.
yep,
How does your proposal
Fit with all
fit
these
with our
things.
design guidelines? It
Yep.
does, it doesn't, or it's not applicable. Sure.
cool.
Anybody in the audience have anything to comment on this? No.
Okay.
No one's interested.
Okay.
All right, move on. All right, next is an informal discussion with Greg Omasta. And company. That's all right.
Jeff Squire from Berkshire Adventure.
Yep.
I've got a plan, I don't know how to, just because it's informal discussion, I don't know whether it's something to put up underneath, but I've got one. If we need one.
Sure, if you got one, let's put it up.
So this is in regards to 137 North Hatfield Road.
Yep.
This is an old zoning map, or at least the one that's still up on the website now, that, but as you know, the last town meeting rezoned this parcel to light industrial. And so this is just exploring some of the opportunities that we have.
Tell me,
there.
folks. Sorry to interrupt.
And just to get your comments before we finalize an application for a project. So bear with me here, my piece is a little longer to assemble. So this is the parcel here outlined in red. Again, surrounding most sides of the parcel. We are looking at a roughly 15,000 square foot footprint. I think, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but with a garage, bays in the back, offices in the front, small parking area in the front that would be paved with 2 access drives, and the remainder of the lot really for the commercial use and operation would remain gravel. Some storage bins in the yard, understanding, wetlands and wetland setbacks around the property. Obviously deal with stormwater management and site lighting and traffic evaluations and all the things required with the special permit application, building elevations, but just in general, we get your thoughts and suggestions or comments before we finalize an application.
So what's outlined in blue?
These are the ditches, the
existing
drainage
ditch
ditches
line.
that are there now.
And is the property itself outlined?
It's almost following the same line.
Okay.
yes.
Okay. So this is a small use of the big property.
Yes.
About how big a,
The building footprint itself is very small. The impervious footprint really is pretty small. We haven't done full calculations. I pushed to say it would even be close to 10% overall, development impact.
Mhm.
Again, just eyeballing it is probably closer to 35% overall.
Okay.
What type of structure are we talking? Like a Morton building kind of thing? or-
Yeah, I think so. Yes. They certainly have some, architectural character to it, a front porch and, some other elements, make sure it blends in with a, be barn-like. But we'll certainly have, elevations and all those requirements.
You're gonna pave the front, do gravel,
This- yes,
do gravel
so the
drives
idea is
around,
just, right, exactly.
gravel drives to get around. Okay.
A couple of sliding gates just to keep, vehicle traffic from getting back to the building after hours, for security, but the remainder of the back would be gravel. Yeah.
Did one of your earlier images show the zoning of these lots?
This was the old zoning map.
Tell me how it's changed.
This is all now light industrial.
So the entire area of the entire lots are light industrial. Okay.
That'll change it for last town meeting.
Understood.
Questions, comments?
A procedural question. Would this require a special permit
I have no idea.
I don't believe so.
or is it just a site plan review?
Yeah, or A&R, really.
I would think that we are operating within what's zoned for that property.
It may be site plan review.
Yeah.
Right.
Does the site plan review require a public hearing?
Yeah, this is just preliminary, like, look what we're thinking about starting, just a courtesy to get it started.
Okay. I have no comment.
Yeah, the only thought I have is like, we'd like to get you a hold of our, we'd like to get you a hold of a copy of our, in the middle of revision design guidelines, because right now they're just kind of a cliff notes for this kind of thing.
Actually, if you could,
Like, here's the
could,
barbed wire that we don't want.
Right.
You can just get right through.
do you have a draft that you could share or that?
Give you paper and we can give you, it's not official, it's going through revision.
We can follow as much. of
But
that as
we're
possible.
pretty much
Sure.
of a mind about that, and what we like, it's
No,
not,
that's great.
there's nothing in it that's too draconian. This is like how to go smooth.
Yep. no, that'd be-
Can I ask a number of dumb questions?
Sure.
Just because I'm dumb and I don't know.
Always.
What's the nature of the business?
It's a landscape site construction business.
Okay, are you going to be doing any work on site such as material hauling, handling, piling, stocking?
That's all in the back.
Are you going to be having any direct to retail sales out of the site? Somebody can drive up with a truck and get a load of something? Okay, so it's just
Just for the business use.
supporting the landscape company itself. Okay. Hours of operation?
I don't know.
6
They've
a.m.
established that
to
yet.
7 p.m., 8 p.m. in the
Five,
sun,
yeah,
in
I
the
mean,
summer,
mornings
I
are
imagine.
Starting early and, yeah, I mean, you know.
I would imagine they could be in and out all times, given snow schedules and things like that.
Mhm.
Certainly
Weekend
understand
work.
that. Yeah, sure. Okay. And the only other question I have is, if you're backing anything up, where will you be backing it up? If you could point to the area on that plan.
Would primarily be in the back. We've tried to align and adjust the entry drive so there's enough turning distance, turning movement to be able to get in. Any of the turnaround would be in the back, and there's enough room for, a tractor trailer truck to be able to spin around in that yard and not.
Okay. Yep. Having worked in both a landscaping company and living near one, I have recognized that one of the most annoying sounds is the backup beeper.
Yeah.
Well, I
So-
think that the backing up at CNS would probably drown them out.
That could very well be. You're not wrong about that. Yeah. So, but, all right, sounds great. You have a landscaping plan for the front
We
area.
will, yes.
Sounds great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. I'm done.
Yeah, and there's a septic system being designed. Yeah, so we look at all those things.
Are any of the vehicles like heavier than your traditional landscaping truck or?
I mean, there'll be tractor trailer trucks that pull in there with materials and supplies.
Okay.
Yeah, on a playground or something, they'll, tractor trailer will show up with all that equipment and drop it in the yard or something.
Okay.
So,
We're already seeing plenty of truck traffic on North Hatfield Road as it is.
Yes.
I don't think that's going to be anything new. More questions, more comments? Anybody?
Nothing.
No, not right now with the preliminary. So far, it looks everything's perfectly fine.
Appreciate all the
Thanks
comments.
for bringing it to us early.
Absolutely.
And
We will see you hopefully not too long.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
all right. Well, so now there's some discussions that we should have while we wait for the PVPC to show up,
Oh, they're not here yet. Okay.
unless they're here now.
Pioneer Valley Planning Group here? Anybody?
No, they weren't due till 7. They said they would be, I saw an email say they'd be here at 10 to 7.
So we can't get an accessory apartment without them?
What's that?
I think we could talk, yeah.
You can get in a number 4 or number 3.
Yeah.
Accessory apartment.
Sure.
Scratch that accessory dwelling.
Accessory dwelling. Yeah.
Well, what time is it scheduled for?
So does anybody have any comments on this one? I personally have an accessory dwelling in my house.
If I may.
Yeah.
If you, I've seen over my house, if you take a ride in a hot air balloon and you float over Hatfield, or any small town really, and you're looking out over the edge of the balloon, you're looking down into a residential area. I would be hard pressed to believe you if you say that you can tell the difference between a car that's parked in front of a main dwelling and a car that's parked in front of an accessory dwelling or an apartment. Or tell the difference between kids playing behind a main dwelling or playing behind an accessory dwelling. Or someone pulling in or out, or someone mowing their lawn, or someone growing a garden. All of these are common uses for the exterior of residential dwellings.
Mhm.
It's based on that sort of overview planning perspective that drove me to look at this.
Uh-huh.
We're not talking about 6 and 8 unit apartment buildings. We're not talking about row houses. We're not talking about major condominium developments. We're talking about the ability of someone who owns a house to either convert a two-car garage, which they don't use, into an accessory dwelling unit, or to put an ADU in their house, or to build a new structure if they have enough land, and if they can meet all the other criteria, standard setbacks for accessory structures, water and wastewater capacity, and down the line. The use on the land, whether it's in a main house or a guest house, accessory dwelling unit, whatever you want to call it, is still a residential use.
Mhm.
The
So would this get into like the little houses kind of thing?
It's right here. It doesn't have to be attached.
Right.
Yeah.
Talk about fully detached. It's the big change.
the idea is that the dwelling would still have to meet the criteria for the building code for a dwelling. It can't, just be someone who converted a chicken coop or something like that.
Hmm.
And if you're converting, say, a 2-bay garage, and you can't just slap some doors on the front and call it a house,
There's the rub.
it would still have to meet all the building code specifications for insulation, for safety, for CO2, for second means of
It's the
egress
whole thing.
down the line.
I don't
Yeah.
necessarily think it's a bad idea. I think that you would see a lot of pushback from kind of the
Oh, yeah.
traditionalists in this town as far as that goes. Again, I'm not necessarily opposed to that idea, but I think that you would see and I don't know, Jimmy, correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I think that people, if they saw like kind of, if people got a hold of the little houses kind of thing, that I could just see people really pushing back against that. I mean,
I don't disagree with you at all.
It's definitely, it's gonna happen.
I mean,
We
I
predicted it the same time.
don't say don't go forward with it. I think
Right.
do
Right.
that knowing that might be the case.
Quickly responding to that, through you,
Yeah,
Mr.
go ahead.
Chairman, a lot of the what they call tiny houses, and a lot of the tiny house communities, those are glorified travel trailers. They really are. They're still on wheels. They are literally registered motor vehicles, and they're not permissible to be used as a dwelling. Short term, 1 week at a time on your campsite, great, fine. But the building inspector couldn't issue you a occupancy permit.
Yeah, I think
For that.
that's where the stigma. I think
You're
that's from where the
absolutely right.
stigma arises.
Yeah.
But I also I have actually worked with a contractor who his specialty is little houses and the permitting involved, and I would have to pick his brain as far as that went.
Sure.
And he's done numerous in the area, Florence and one in Whately up by Westbrook.
Yep.
And and those are they're foundations and they're real houses. It's just it's another small house. And I guess it kind of goes to the whole character of what we're trying to accomplish here with trying to find ways to create housing in this town without stepping on toes.
Sure.
And so I guess the stepping on toes part is
Okay. These are just suggested starting points.
yeah.
One of the things, just in my mind, one of the things I'm thinking that could be looked at is the amount of area required. I'm thinking about my aunt who has 6.5 acres in Leeds. She's owned the house since the early 1970s. She bought it for $8,000. Great deal at the time. But it's a 3,000 square foot house, and she wants to downsize. It's just her now, so she's thinking about the idea of building a smaller house somewhere on the back of the property, enabling her to sell the larger house. And she can't do that because she doesn't have enough frontage. She has plenty of area. She could build the house and no one would even see it, but she doesn't have the frontage. One of the permutations of this could be that an accessory dwelling unit or accessory separate structure would only be allowed if you have the necessary area for 2 building lots, 2 acres or more. That's one possibility.
Yeah, that's in here. Everything's got to float under building. Everything's got to be under building, right? So
Right.
that's going to preclude a lot of tiny lots, right?
Yeah,
Don't have too many.
Right. And if you've got a non-conforming lot, this isn't going to work for that. It's just not going to be possible.
And right now, we're not encouraging people to put 2 houses on 1 lot.
No, and I would say a lot of people aren't aware of the bylaw as it stands, that they could do like a,
It's current
Accessory
attached
ADU.
accessory.
But
We know that because he's done one. So
Yeah.
since we passed that, we've got one.
But I would say if we do some education leading up to town meeting, sharing the differences between ADUs, detached ADUs and tiny homes, because that is people do have a lot of misconceptions about that. There are so many folks in Hatfield that want to age in place, but just can't in the
Too much.
homes that they live in. AARP has a lot of like handouts and educational materials, promotional materials for ADUs that maybe we could order some of those and have in town hall to spread awareness about it. And then additionally, I'm not certain, but I think changing this would be similar to the open space development bylaw in that it would only require a majority vote.
Actually, no, this would be a change to the zoning bylaw. Requires a vote at town meeting.
But at town meeting, I don't think it would need 2/3.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Because-
misunderstood what you said. Okay, yes.
Because it has to do with housing and allowing for more housing. I think it falls under that
50%.
category.
51.
Yeah. So something to think about.
The,
But I think it's great.
the other tickle in the works is that the governor has put forth a bill that's under consideration that would basically supersede any local regulations or restrictions on accessory dwelling units and would just make them allowed by right.
So
Mm.
that might be
On
in the
conforming
works
lots.
anyways. Yeah.
So being able to put something in place with at least some criteria that establishes some minimum standards now,
Before the state tells.
before the state just comes in and
Yeah.
says, well, guess what? It's open season.
Yep.
We got to have
Well,
more than
if it
30.
Superseded, I mean, we could still be reactionary to it. I mean, anything we put there, if the state came through and superseded us, I mean, it would be moot.
True.
I mean, I think that we could probably be reactionary to that.
So you got to have 30,000 square feet for an ADU, right? What we're getting into on the fourth page. So bigger than a half-acre lot to qualify.
Doesn't mean we can't figure it out in advance, know what we want to do.
On an acre and a half, an ADU would be permitted by right. On less than an acre and a half, but at least 3/4 of an acre, they'd have to come to the planning board for a site plan review to make sure that it meets all criteria and to make sure that it wouldn't cause any greater disturbance than what's there now.
And anything less than
Anything less than 30,000 is not allowed.
is right out. Okay.
So that means 30,000 is 2/3 of an acre.
Right.
So there's a lot of lots that just wouldn't qualify.
When we put up our house, we fought with this town. We put up a house with an in-law apartment, accessory apartment on it,
Mhm.
all one unit,
Mhm.
5 boxes.
Mhm.
It was the building inspector at the time denied our permit. And it was for a handicapped person to come live with us.
Oh, geez.
So we
Yeah.
went to Stavros
Mhm.
and got an opinion from them and signed a special agreement with the town. The building inspector at the time did not like me. So that was way on. But in the same token, I mean, what we did was very new to the town. And not that many people were aware of it and not that many people were comfortable with it, you know, thinking that you're now putting 2 houses on 1 lot and why can't we all do that?
Mhm.
You know, but it wasn't that way. So the delineation of an accessory apartment is very specific. Any more? Anybody?
Oh, I did want to just point out that this does require owner occupancy.
On one or the other.
With one or the other,
One or the
doesn't
other.
matter.
Doesn't
So if
matter.
you got the 3,000 square foot house and you want to move into the 900 and rent out the 3,000, you can do that.
Right.
Yeah. But with the owner on the property, the expectation is that any disturbance is going to self-govern, at least to some extent. So anyway, it's something to think about.
All right.
Or the other way, if you've got the mother moving into the other room.
Yeah, she moves in, I'm moving into the guest house. Yeah, right, exactly. Move into the doghouse, whatever.
All right. Well, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission is we're not ready for them yet. Can you see the clock?
20 of.
Okay. You want to go to Janelle, an update from Janelle?
Recurring agenda.
Yeah. So my update has to do with maybe some of the things that the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission is going to be talking about.
Okay.
But we've been approached by someone who is possibly interested in building some apartments in town. Our current bylaws only allow for a maximum of 6 units in any multifamily build. Something that the PVPC and our recommendations for our updated master plan are thinking about is like a Chapter 40R district. So thinking about where that might be if we want this person to come in for a preliminary meeting with us. They're pretty like, I don't think they want to announce anything right now before knowing if that's something that we would even be interested in. But that's something I think we're going to talk about.
With 40R, do we have anything to do with it?
So
Or was they bypass us?
I
They
think
conform to that
We-
restriction.
designate the district that it would be going, though.
We have some say in just the where.
Yeah,
Then it's hands off because it's 40R.
believe so. I need them to tell me more about
Projects
that.
must be developable under the community smart growth zoning adopted under chapter 40R. So that's zoning that we would need to adopt.
Mhm.
We'd have to have the 40R overlay district. That's something we need to
That's
draw.
the question.
figure
We
out.
have to buy into that first.
We'd have to buy into that. That would have to be accepted.
That's a
at town
May
meeting.
thing. That's the town.
Right.
Which they might be interested in waiting for that if that's something that we choose to pursue.
It's already February, right? Is it something that's already on the docket for May, or is something we are going to present to try to get on the docket by next month, which is kind of deadline
it's
for
feasible.
presenting something
Yeah.
in May? That's the thing.
Yeah,
So then this project is out a year.
yeah.
So that's moot for the year 2025. So I was wondering, because I was also misinformed that 40R is a state mandate. You don't have any
No,
say.
no, it's-
You're in
it's
it.
an opt-in.
You're in it.
It's
Okay.
an opt-in.
Okay.
The town has to locally adopt
Okay.
it. Yeah. It could be a good thing because a 40R could do a couple things. It could create the opportunity for pocket districts, or pocket neighborhoods, I should say. So imagine, if you will, a 8-acre lot, but there's only development on 2 acres of it, but it's 16 either, units altogether in some formation of that. That seems like it could be advantageous to the town. Again, providing more housing, leaving as much undisturbed land as possible. And it's up to the town to determine what the district is, where you want to allow it, where you don't want to allow it.
It's going to be a
And the
fight.
town could also, in defining its 40R regulations, it could again set criteria. What do you want 40R development to look like? Nothing higher than 2-story, only, certain types of architecture. You can be as specific or as generic as you want.
So it wouldn't be completely out of the control of.
No, not at all, not at all. It does say that once the quick thing I just read, once you adopt the overlay district, and once you adopt the criteria, a 40R development is allowed by right. They basically have to go through the review, make sure they're checking all the boxes. We make sure they're checking all the boxes, and then it goes.
But our role at that point would be steerage then. Kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a big thing to consider.
Lots of pictures.
Oh, good.
Hello.
Hi.
We're ahead of schedule, so
Yeah.
Well ahead.
we could do the
The minutes.
we could do minutes. Get minutes out if you guys need.
Sure.
I think we have to wait for our time.
Mm-hmm. They said they'd be here at 10 of, and they're scheduled for 7 o'clock.
Are they? They're actually not scheduled. There's no time on the agenda.
I think it's just we told them to come 10 minutes before 7, so there might
Okay.
still be
Right.
some people.
Okay, fair enough.
Some more courtesy.
Um, you want a motion on the minutes?
Okay.
Sure, let's just go over.
Yeah, you want
Okay.
to take a minute? Okay.
Have a motion to accept the minutes.
So moved.
What?
You asked for a motion to accept the
Yep.
minutes? So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Minutes are accepted as read. Okay.
Okay, that's all right.
Do you have more folks coming? Okay. And we'll just wait.
Can I just speak from here? Is this
Sure.
right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure how.
And
to
you might pull that mic next to you?
Okay. So my name is Patty Gambarini. I'm with the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission with my colleagues Becky Bash and Kyle, Fennell. And we have been working on the MVP grant that the town has, consulting on certain parts of the project. And one task that we have on the grant is to consider some of the regulatory requirements you have on the books and make some suggestions based on some of the, this is some of what we're seeing when we look at current and future potential flooding in town. So really thinking about how might Hatfield be more resilient to flooding as you permit projects. So we have done sort of a preliminary review of specific parts of your code, looking at, and did everybody get the handout that, does anyone need a copy?
The handout that starts with the
It's got a cover page with the summaries.
summaries of Hatfield Municipal
Yeah.
Code and considerations. Okay.
Okay, that's great.
I don't think I
So
have a copy of it.
No, I don't
we
think I
have,
do.
we have,
Do you have a copy? I don't.
If you have more copies, I
yes, we
yeah.
have more copies.
Thank you. I have one. I didn't-
Thanks. Jimmy needs one.
Thank you.
You can share if you want.
Oh,
You got one. Cool.
Oh, that's.
So we thought we'd take it in this order, but there's essentially 5 areas that we're looking at. And I think our goal for our conversation tonight, it would be great if we could figure out how to best invest the time we have on this task to, focus on something that you see as priority. And we have about 125 hours of our staff time to devote to this. So we could look at 1 or 2 things, or if there's a third thing that's not a big piece. So that's sort of the goal of tonight. But we're looking at housing, health and environment, and with an emphasis on healthy aging as well. Then stormwater management, flood resilience, and farmland protection as sort of the 5 areas that were articulated in the grant for focusing on this piece of work. So I think what we'll start with, do you have any questions at this point?
Anybody?
No.
Not yet.
I guess one other thing I'd like to say is that this is the 2nd year of this grant. And I don't know if Stephanie's been talking with you about sort of the work as we've been progressing. Are you familiar with the
Not really.
work of the comprehensive plan? Okay, so I'll just give you a little background. We spent the first year really meeting regularly with the comprehensive plan committee, and John and Angelica are both on it, as well as Stephanie. There's representation from just about every board in town. And we've been meeting and looking at things like the engineering team brought some of the flooding data for consideration last year to our meeting. And so there were a lot of conversation around that. We did some public engagement virtually and then at the Black Birch Vineyard to talk with people and interact specifically on topics that this plan covers. And so that our first year was a lot of engagement and the engineering analysis. And then this year, we started out the year by doing chapter working groups. So by state law, there's specific topics that need to be covered in a comprehensive plan or what was formerly called a master plan. And so the working groups met through the fall. to develop content in each chapter. So some of the recommendations in this, you'll see there are specific recommendations coming out of certain chapter working groups. And then there's additional recommendations in here. So we will complete the work and there'll be a draft plan for your review because officially it's the planning board that is sort of the holder of a comprehensive plan in any given town. And I think the plan is for the select board to also approve it and adopt it. I think that's what the conversation has been to date within the committee. And so, that we have till the end of June on all of this. So we have still quite a bit of work in front of us.
Mhm.
And I'm really glad to be here tonight to start this piece of work with you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to turn it over to Kyle, who's going to talk about housing. And then Becky's going to do health and social environment and healthy aging. And then I'll cover the last three topics, stormwater management, flooding, and farmland protection.
Thank you, members of the board. I'm going to talk through the summary of housing regulations that the town of Hatfield has on the books and some of the recommendations, considerations coming out of the work on housing for the comprehensive plan. I've been supporting this chapter this past fall. I'm also supporting the work on facilities, services, and social resilience. So I'm excited to get some feedback from the board. Just a quick summary of the existing bylaws and regulations. Hatfield's zoning bylaws allow 1 and 2 family detached dwellings in all residential and business districts. Although 2 family dwellings, as you may know, require special permit in any outlying residential districts. Both single family or multifamily uses require special permit in all business districts. And single family detached dwellings are allowed in agricultural districts with site plan review. Interestingly, multifamily units are not allowed by right in any of zoning districts in town. However, in your rural residential, town center business, and business districts, multifamily development may be allowed with special permit and site plan approval. So multifamily housing is also allowed through permitting mixed-use developments in the mixed-use development bylaw, which is section 6.6 of the zoning bylaw. Includes optional affordable housing bonuses. Granted, 10% of total units are designated as affordable. So through the work that I've been conducting with the Comprehensive Plan Committee Working Group on housing, a big issue that's been identified is affordable housing. This is an issue that the community has faced for a few years. Many communities in the region face it. It was pointed to in the last housing production plan from 2015. The past 10 years of building permits also show that single family building has been essentially all of the development for housing in the meantime. The subsidized unit rate in the community remains around 3%. I think it's 3.7 of subsidized housing inventory. And about 24% of households, homeowner households, and 14% of renter households are considered housing burden, which means they're spending 30% or more of their income on housing costs, which is a large challenge for residents of the community. So some considerations that have come through the work that we've been doing and come from the housing chapter. There are 5 that I'd like to speak to, and some of them have regulatory review components, some of them don't. But first and foremost, there's the recommendation of expanding the accessory dwelling unit zoning bylaw. That's mislabeled here. It's called accessory apartment. I believe it's section 334 of the zoning bylaw. Quick elaboration, I believe the issue there that the housing working group has identified is the issue of attached versus detached accessory apartments. And the recommendation would be just to consider the option of a detached accessory. The second recommendation, increasing density in appropriate areas utilizing a 40R smart growth and or a 40Y starter home zoning districts. Those are special zoning districts that have a state approved process. The 40R path requires a vote at the annual town meeting for that to go into effect and be accepted by the Executive Office on Housing and Livable Communities, excuse me. So that would be a longer process, but that is something that can be considered in regulatory review. The third consideration would be establishing relationships with local housing nonprofit organizations to hopefully build those relationships with developers to bring more units to the community. The fourth recommendation, establishing a public housing trust fund, municipal housing trust fund, to receive, manage, and administer CPA, Community Preservation Act funds for housing projects. There's some work to be done to create that type of an entity, but there are some benefits to having that group manage those monies. A municipal affordable housing trust can also afford or accept donations of land and money. So it's an interesting tool to have in a community to direct those monies in productive channels. The fifth recommendation coming from our chapter includes reviewing potential use of inclusionary housing programs, inclusionary zoning. There are a lot of different ways that an inclusionary zoning can materialize. There are a lot of different strategies. 40R, previously mentioned, the smart growth zone would be considered an inclusionary zoning tool because it affords mixed use by right and has an affordable component. There are some additional best practices that have been in conversation, talking about the desire for homeowners to be able to convert a single family dwelling to a multifamily dwelling, and also adaptive reuse of historic structures for housing, and creating inventory of undeveloped properties that would be suitable for affordable housing development. So a couple of related recommendations from previous planning efforts in town, just to finish up, just to identify existing municipally owned, town-owned parcels that could be donated or sold for affordable housing, and then increasing the role and services provided by the Hatfield Housing Authority. Right. So that summarizes kind of a quick analysis of what's on the books in terms of housing, and then the issues that the housing group has identified that may need some additional analysis and review, and would welcome any thoughts from the board on priorities or issues you think you would like to prioritize. Thank you.
Thank
Well,
you.
If I may.
I wonder if you could just speak on the CPA. I'm the representative to the CPA.
Right.
For the board, and it hasn't been discussed at the board, but it's been on my radar, the idea of having that fund
Right.
from which low or no interest loans, I believe that's the idea, can be meted out to allow for for people to be able to take these loans and be able to afford housing that they may not be able to in town. Am I on the right track here? I wonder if you could delve into that more eloquently than me.
You're right. I'm not familiar with municipal housing trusts being used to award small grants. I'm more familiar with the work. Amherst has a very active municipal housing trust. I'm more familiar with their work in kind of the development side of things. So working with nonprofit groups like Valley CDC or Wayfinders to bring those developers into the community, help them find the parcels that are not necessarily appealing for kind of commercial market rate development, and helping partner and kind of build those relationships. I'm still new to municipal affordable housing trusts. There are not many of them active in the region. Amherst is probably one of the most successful. So I can't speak to that particular topic. But in terms of the entity itself, having that group and that fund available, again, I think the benefit is that it's, you have your dedicated housing funding coming from the CPA excise tax. And having the trust then able to bring in and receive additional donations offers a lot of flexibility. And then that entity, the housing trust, then has the capacity also to make land purchases and kind of broker development. Does that elaborate on some of the
Like
pros
I
and-
can say that that currently the CPA would be ripe for new ideas for sure. I mean, the pockets are fat on the committee right now, and I mean, obviously, we're not looking to just hand money out. But I think that a well presented, something well projected would be presented and projected would be well received by the committee.
Right.
Certainly.
That's great. That's good to know. And that's something that we could absolutely look into if that's a priority in relation to housing from the planning board's perspective.
I mean, I think it's one of the things that could be, expedited. It's something
Right.
that could happen
Right.
right away,
Yeah.
or within the year. We're past our.
Yeah, but definitely could be more of a short-term solution that could at least get the ball rolling on some development. Yeah.
And here's the thing with something like that, for us as a committee to act on these things, it has to come to us. And John, you could speak to that too. All the time we're saying, you have to come to us
right
with your project and present it to us, in a way that we'll be able to present to the town.
Right.
But yeah, I think the opportunity is there.
Good to hear. Yeah. Thank you for that.
More? Anybody? Any comments from the audience?
No, I'd just like to say, first of all, thank you for all the work you've been doing on this, because the future of Hatfield sort of depends on it.
Yeah.
But as we all know, the comments from people in town have always been, my child would love to move back here. They have no place to find to rent, or they can't buy a house. Or the residents are saying, well, we have a big lot. We'd love to build on it, another house, but we can't under the present zoning laws.
Right.
And that does tie in with our school system also, because everybody knows, luckily, we've been getting school's choice, but there's less and less kids from Hatfield going in our school system. And that's because we don't have the younger folks moving in and building here. So on the housing issue, it's important that a solution's found to help offset that. Because I mean, that's what we're saying. So again, thank you for the work you guys are doing. I appreciate it. And those are my comments as far as housing.
Thanks, Ed.
And now we go over these bullet points. I don't think you'll find any objections to any of these recommendations, but
Right.
Stephanie has been keeping us very informed of the work she's been doing,
Wonderful.
Just when you get into it, that's, she's been keeping us up.
Awesome.
I will, just to add, like, when you're thinking about your 125 hours, because really that's not a lot of time.
You're right. Yeah.
So something that we discussed earlier in our meeting tonight, we are I think we're going to go with adding detached ADUs as
really?
something at this year's annual
town
town meeting. And then I'm interested,
I think we,
Is that-
are we?
uh,
Did that get decided?
I don't think we decided
we
that.
did not
Just-
decide.
It's on our radar.
It
Didn't have a
seems
lot of
like we're
didn't
in
have objection.
support. So
sorry.
I shouldn't jump to that conclusion. Sorry. But potentially we could be adding that to this year's town meeting, and I don't. It seems favorable that we do that.
Great.
And then for 40R, is it possible that you've done any like internal identifying of areas that you think would be like best suited for that in town?
Yeah, we've gotten some good feedback from the members of the Comprehensive Plan Committee, particularly the Housing Working Group. We've identified parcels and areas of town that have existing infrastructure, water and sewer, and started to look at larger parcels that may make sense to explore a smart growth district.
Okay.
There's definitely, along the Route 5 corridor, but then there's also near town center, but just out of the floodplain that's been identified. And something that we haven't talked about in the working group, but I've thought about is the 40Y, the starter family. Yeah, the family starter home. Because there's some extra incentives, and there's also a different requirement for density. So it doesn't have to be so dense, and it doesn't have to be so affordable. It's just different ranges. And that might be an approach that the community is more open to, rather than being mixed use, which is the smart growth. Mixed use and affordability. The starter family is much more affordability and just a more concentrated density of starter family homes.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's something that I'd be interested in seeing, is when we're thinking about flooding and preserving prime farmlands and stormwater and all of those things, is like, how does that determine where an area like that might best fit in town?
Right.
And then something that I just wanted to add for CPA funds is something that I know Joe Lavalle has mentioned a couple of times, is for this position. So I'm graduating in May, and I will be moving on, which means there will be a vacancy in this assistant planner position at some point. Possibly using CPA funds to beef hours up in this position for the next person, and utilizing them as like planner and like person to do these tasks, like establishing relationships with these different partners in town. Maybe that can be an avenue too, is what I
Something to investigate.
was thinking.
Yeah.
So those are my comments.
Thank you.
I was going to ask if you could, in 20 seconds, bullet point what a 40Y is.
Yes, off the top of my head. 40Y would be a zoning district that allows for a greater density than your base zoning. So
Reduced frontage, reduced setbacks,
right,
reduced
all of that.
area.
And then it's a requirement of 10% units need to be affordable at up to 110% area median income.
Okay.
So it actually kind of broadens the affordability window, or what affordable means, which actually makes it affordable for more people, right? People that may have a career, but maybe earning just a little bit above the 80% area median income, it widens that and offers affordability for more folks.
So the folks who would take advantage of a 40Y would still be a developer looking to develop multiple housing units in an area.
Yeah,
And that might either be a for-profit developer or a nonprofit.
it could be, yeah, right.
Yes.
I believe one other differing characteristic for 40Y, I don't believe there are requirements for the same type of infrastructure to be in place. So I think 40Y districts can be like off sewer, they can be on septic, something
Sure.
like that. Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
And they're not conflicting. We can, suggest and try to get 40R and 40Y passed.
Yeah, right.
Push for them both. And
Does the-
see what happens.
Does the 40Y require adoption by the state agency?
That is a
Or-
good question. I believe it does, but I'm unsure about that. I haven't seen any 40Y projects recently.
Okay.
And I know that the state is currently separating those processes. It
Okay.
used to be 40R was both smart growth and starter family housing.
Okay.
They've split those, and I think they're still finalizing the 40Y regulations.
And to be clear, Hatfield could look at its zoning,
Mhm.
create either overlay districts or change its existing zoning districts to simply reduce frontage requirements or increase density by reducing lot sizes based on the resources available in that specific area.
Right.
Like if there's town water and town sewer available, you reduce the area, throwing that out as an example.
Right.
We don't need to adopt 40R or 40Y to look at increased density natively.
Correct. The benefits of going the route of 40R would be to receive density bonus incentive payments from the state. So there's an allowance for, there's a one-time payment for the totality of a development. And then once each unit is brought online, there's a number that the state then awards the community for each unit.
Okay. And the units do not have to be held by an organization or held by a nonprofit. They can be privately owned homes.
There just has to be some type of affordability deed restriction
Sure.
for, I think, 20 years or more.
For at least the 10% under 41.
For that,
Fair enough.
I think it's 20% over the entire project
Okay, thanks.
and 41R. Yeah.
Thanks.
And so if a comprehensive permit is used to build something in that district, any of those units count towards our affordable inventory, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Those should be counted as subsidized.
Okay.
on the inventory.
By
Yeah.
comprehensive permit, you mean a 40B?
Yep. All right. Thank you. I'll hand it over to my colleague Becky Beck.
Okay, so I'm Becky Gosh, Senior Planner. My focus is in health and land use. And so I was involved early in the process in engaging older adults in Hatfield as part of the engagement process. Because this is a municipal vulnerability preparedness grant funding this plan, older adults were identified as a highly vulnerable population. And so that's why we do more engagement for that population. And I look at a number of aspects of a community that support healthy aging. So within the built environment, it would be transportation, housing, parks and open spaces. But then we also look at the social environment like health and community services, transportation services, public safety, a number of different aspects. So that's just sort of a background of how I look at the zoning. And so when I looked at the regulations, I kind of focused on open spaces, sidewalks and walkability, as well as housing. So I'd echo everything that Kyle said, but also looking at as your population ages and in every community in our region, I think except for maybe two, the population of older adults is outnumbering the population of kids under 18. And by 2035, it's going to be, that'll be the case everywhere. So as, you know, as people age, a lot of people are living alone or just with one other person. So they're looking, you know, to downsize from a large single family house for more affordability and also less maintenance. You also have to think about, you know, as people age, there's a higher incidence of dementia. So are there spaces for caregivers, you know, density so that a number of people could be, you know, could share services at the same time. So I look at smart growth in terms of walkability, density, smaller units. Also, for walkability, we look at sidewalks and accessibility. So I pulled that out of your subdivision regulations. Under open spaces, there was, you know, a requirement that the planning board may require a plan to show a park or playground. So having recreational spaces nearby for people to be outside in nature and also exercise. Sidewalks and driveway approaches. There weren't a lot of requirements there. Accessory apartments we already covered. They, you know, it'd be great if you can expand them to allow for attached units by right, detached units by special permit if you like. And then also I looked at the table of dimension and density regulations. And as we've discussed, they're large, the minimum lot sizes are pretty large in town. So some considerations under subdivisions would really be to get into the sidewalk regulations, look at existing sidewalks and are there linkages to the existing sidewalks and or trails with new subdivisions. And also looking at the design. So like a buffer strip of 4 feet wide between the pedestrian way and the road required just for better comfort and shade. And then when driveways cross the sidewalk, make sure it's one level so you don't have to do a lot of ramps for accessibility. And then, so in terms of housing, we talked, you know, Kyle went over accessory apartments and also looking at dimension and density regulations, allowing for smaller lot sizes, and such as an overlay. So those are really what I focused on. But in your question about the CPA, I have also heard of other communities that use the CPA to actually provide low-cost loans for retrofitting existing properties to make them more accessible and age-friendly. Right now in New England, I think there's the number of houses that are age-ready is like under 6%. And so that means like a no-step entry, a master bedroom and bathroom on the first floor, safety equipment for accessibility. So that's another consideration for any new housing development is, you know, potentially providing incentives to make or requirements to make a number of buildings more accessible for people with mobility issues. Yeah, so those are my sort of a brief overview of the things that I was looking at. But I'd be happy to have a discussion, and I don't know if you guys have talked about any of the, you know, I think you don't currently have over 55 districts. In speaking with my committee, they felt there were a lot of developments that were specifically for over 55, but not necessarily affordable ones. So that's something else to potentially look at.
I think the 2 condominium complexes on Elm Street are an indication of that exactly, because, you know, they are definitely not in the affordable class.
Yeah.
You know, at $500,000, that's not affordable to many.
Right. Right. And, you know, if you're looking to attract young families, there's quite a bit of overlap between older adults and young, young, not necessarily families, but young couples looking to start out. So starting with smaller, more affordable units within walkable distance of services and parks and amenities. So that's something else to consider.
And just to drive home your point again, the community preservation stuff is underused as far as the affordable housing aspect. We see it go to, they're great projects, but mostly it's people think of it as just fixing historical things, and they don't ever consider that angle.
Yeah. And another thing, some communities take historical buildings and turn them into congregate housing. If you have a large historic house or other building, make it a small congregate housing structure for older people with shared kitchen, shared services. So sort of a kind of a co-housing, but supported housing. So that could be a great use of CPA funds if you have any structures like that. We do, run into the floodplain issue. One affordable housing project is in the floodplain, and that came up in our discussions. So just considering parts of town that aren't in the floodplain, you have a lot of historic districts, so that could be definitely something to look at.
Just really quickly, you may not know the answer, is when you're talking about full accessibility of structures, 0-step thresholds, minimum width doorways, accessible bathrooms, that sort of thing, first floor living or bedroom, that's essentially universal access design principles. Is that part of the building code? Do you know? You may not. Don't feel bad if you don't.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I mean, I think you can add that to site plan review, site plan standards.
To maintain, to require it if you're reviewing a development, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's part of current building standards.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Questions, comments? Anybody? John?
Your ideas about making accessibility issues inside of one's home, that's, I think, a great need. Talking with one person, won't say who, where, what, but that house is being accommodated for the specific person. And to, think of it in the future. I mean, new projects could have a child or old, like you say, parent or grandparent, make it, a grab bar for anyone, a young child or an adult, it's there. Like how many showers are being built now, you see on TV, they put the grab bars, shows that it may be gearing it towards the adult, older adult, but a young person slips and falls, there's no grab handle in the back of the shower. Make it so it is.
Yeah, and especially having a bedroom on the first floor and bathroom on the first floor, you don't know you need that till you need it. A lot of older people fall and then suddenly can't go up the stairs, and so they have to, retrofit immediately.
And I'll add a laundry on the first floor as well.
Yeah.
My mother-in-law is 84. Her bedroom's on the second floor. Her laundry's in the basement.
Yeah.
Just doesn't work
Yeah,
anymore.
it's scary. Yeah.
So are these things we're talking about to be in place for future development? Or are we talking about suggesting them for retrofitting?
I think you could do both. I mean, I think for future development, add something to site plan review, look at the density of districts, and so that would be for future. You can't really require retrofitting of existing houses, but if with the CPA, you could create a fund for retrofitting. There used to be Pioneer Valley Planning Commission used to have a home modification loan program. We don't manage that anymore, but they are around, but they're pretty high demand, and they also require a lien. So, if you have the CPA, do it without a lien, and it's a lot easier and a lot more accessible.
Anybody else?
I'm just thinking because we talked about our design guidelines earlier and what we're proposing. I couldn't find right now where or if we state the size of a sidewalk. So I'm assuming we just default to ADA standards, which is 4 feet, but that's something we could consider adding is the 5 feet sidewalks on collector streets and type 2 subdivisions.
Yeah, I think what you had now is minimum 4 feet on local streets and 5 feet on both sides of collector. But yeah, the wider the better, and with a buffer strip is also good.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. So is there for, I guess that would take into account turning around a wheelchair already. But okay, sorry, that was my bad.
Yeah, and another recommendation would be to adopt a complete streets policy and a complete streets program that will give you access to funding for sidewalk projects, crosswalks, bike lanes. I know a lot of those were mentioned in the plan as desirable, and so that would give you, I think it's like 45,000 for developing a prioritization plan through a consultant. And then up to 400,000 for implementation of a project. So it's a good program.
Anybody else? More? Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I ask you in that conversation what the priorities were? If you were to tackle something with,
On a personal note, I think that the priority would be to, as she said, keep the elderly population in place as they want to be. Personally, anecdotally, we couldn't keep my father in the house just because the doorways weren't wide enough, and we couldn't, and it wasn't possible to retrofit the house for that. So having the opportunity, not that necessarily would have happened for us, but having the opportunity to have a separate auxiliary building would have been great. So I think that's something that's doable. My opinion on sidewalks in this town are, I think it's spot kind of. This is where they would be, where you could pull it off, and there's a lot of places where you just wouldn't be able to. I mean, the town, the way it's set up now to put sidewalks all the way through, it just wouldn't be tenable. But being specific as to where that kind of development needed to be and should be encouraged, I think would be advantageous to us.
Yeah, and I think in the transportation chapter, they did look at a sidewalk network, a proposed network and places where there, where it ends and you could easily connect it to another existing sidewalk. So just looking more closely at that would be good.
I think having it as a on your radar sort of thing is obviously a good thing. I mean, and pedestrian traffic is great.
Okay.
You good?
We got any priorities? Would you pick one? You pick a favorite if you had
I would
to?
actually agree with the idea of being able to let folks age in place as they can. Definitely, either through the use of CPA funds to allow people to modify their homes to allow that would be great. Whether it's a zero interest loan or what have you. Yeah.
We're already working on accessory dwelling units. We're pretty much for that.
That's kind
We're
of
already trying to work on dimensional and density regulations primarily through open space, but you won't find anybody opposed to these recommendations. It's hard to say
Yeah.
what's the best when they're all good and necessary.
I wonder if with the detached accessory units, if you could provide some kind of incentive to make them accessible, to make them no step entry, that kind of thing. I haven't seen that, but it just sort of came to mind as, a bonus.
Yeah. Easily added as a requirement.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that would make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And I got a little excited earlier when I said that we were bringing that to town meeting. We haven't decided on that yet. But perhaps a priority would be, I had mentioned earlier that AARP has some promotional materials for detached accessory dwelling units, but maybe if some of the hours were made to create promotional materials specifically tailored to people in Hatfield, because I mean, we do have this bylaw already for accessory apartments, but you said it had only been used once, right? In
Yeah, the attached.
the,
That's
the
what
atta-
Kyle said. Like, of the many years we've had this,
we've only had
one.
one.
Permit request. Who
Mm.
knows how many people
And
put
I-
one up without a permit, but
Oh.
one permit
Yeah.
request.
So I think there's a lack of maybe knowledge and ability. So if there was maybe a roadmap, if we go forward with this, for how people could use the bylaw and what the process would look like, I think that'd be helpful, especially because when compared to tiny homes, ADUs are significant upfront cost. So making it seem more accessible to people, and I think that would be helpful. Would be my suggestion.
We do have a user education problem on that, it seems.
Yeah.
There's also the AARP planning or challenge grants. That might be a good thing to apply for. I think they're due for pretty soon, but it's kind of a quick turnaround project, but that would be right up that alley. So that was an addition. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Stormwater management?
So I am going to cover 3 areas, starting with stormwater management. And taking a look at the existing bylaws and regulations, just to go over what's in here. You have some some requirements for drainage in the definitive plan process with the development impact statement and standards, but it seems like they're kind of dated and lacking in specificity. Also, there's things that give way to creation of more impervious than may be necessary. And when we think about, our extreme weather patterns and the impacts on us, I heard someone very smart from the UNH Stormwater Center say that, the biggest impact is really creating more impervious surface. And the more we can constrain that sort of in development, the more resilient we can be, no matter whatever else happens. That is really important. And just to say up front, I think when you're thinking about stormwater and limiting impervious surface, you're also tending to the impacts of extreme summer heat, which impervious will magnify. So you're really taking care of 2 things. You're, mitigating for localized flooding, and you're also mitigating for that extreme summer heat. If you look at some of the heat maps that I think it was a Trust for Public Land did, and I think I showed them at some of our meetings, you look at Northampton, it's like really pink and hot in summer. These are satellite images, and Hatfield is still looking really good. So there's an opportunity here to sort of keep on that same track as best you can, while also tending to all the other things that need to be taken care of. So I think about stormwater, it's looking for where you might fine tune the dials in terms of reducing impervious cover. So you do have some content in your subdivision regulations requirements. And then in your zoning bylaw, you have your stormwater management bylaw nested in there as part of site plan review. And it's great. You have, you're regulating development proposing 10,000 square feet of new impervious. And it also applies to any project disturbing an acre or more. And that latter part is part of what EP and Mass DEP require of communities that are regulated under the what is fondly known as the MS4 permit in other communities that have more dense settlement. So that's a great piece in your zoning bylaw. one of the things I was thinking is that so that's, it's, I think it might work better if it's outside of zoning and you have like a general bylaw, bare bones general bylaw, and then regulations that can be updated as you need to. As it is in zoning, there's some inconsistencies about referencing different sections and not all pointing back to this. I think in the subdivision regs and zoning, you could have it all refer to this one other place in your code. And it might just be more streamlined to be one place to look for, what do I need to do if you decide to do, more than what you have right now in your zoning bylaw. So out of the land use chapter, one of the recommendations is requiring an operation and maintenance plan where there's development that is proposing particular stormwater infrastructure. And really, how will that be maintained over the longer term? A recommendation coming out of the housing chapter is to really push for more low impact development, really reducing the amount of impervious and promoting sort of stormwater facilities closer to where rain is falling rather than larger structures. And we have a great checklist that sets up a process for low impact development. So low impact development applies to sort of the type of stormwater, or we've used it in talking about the stormwater facilities themselves. But it's also bigger than that. It's about the process. How do you, when you go to a site and you start thinking about development on a site, what's your process for thinking about the site and where certain things go? So we have a checklist that can be used early on in the process, a preliminary plan, or even, I think you have on the books like a pre-planning meeting that's encouraged. I can't remember if I don't know if I wrote it in here. But like at one of those points, maybe to use this checklist, and the checklist involves some very specific things about looking at the site, and it's not very onerous. It's, small sort of concept drawing with looking at soils maps, looking at certain resources on site. So that might be a good thing to refer to at somewhere in your code, like to use this checklist, and you can tailor it to however you'd like it to be. Then so there is the pre-submission review. That's the meeting that you have in your subdivision regulation. So it could be there or the preliminary plan. What we didn't see very much at all is like some really specifics on erosion and sediment control. And that seems like an important thing to cover. So that could be one area that you update. And you could, the other thing is the mass stormwater standards. You could pull those standards to apply to your upland areas. And that's and those are in development, or there's a draft out now through Mass DEP for wetlands jurisdictional areas. And you could adopt those for your upland areas as well to really reduce impervious and increase recharge requirements for stormfall. So I think that's it on stormwater. Is there any part of, sort of the recommendation side of things, or anything that I said that you feel like there's something missing, or something that rings out as a priority?
I don't think so. Anybody?
No.
I mean, I'm always for the simplification of code, right? If we've got inconsistencies or overcomplications, right? Pull the storm out of zoning, make it its own. That just seems like a low hanging fruit, like, let's get on that, right? Not a priority, but this is just something that's going to help everybody in the long
Mhm.
run. So is it as impactful as the other big things you're talking about? It's just sort of, no brainer.
Yeah.
Just like to make it simple. Like the checklist too. People love the checklist. So much things you have to go through. You simplify for somebody,
Mhm.
increase adoption, or compliance.
Okay. All right. So, like a bare bones stormwater management bylaw, and then pulling your zoning stormwater bylaw into regulations, essentially.
Yeah. And also with what your Mass DP is proposing to see what we can do to point to that there, and where what we don't need to say because it's already,
Yeah, reference
where we want to
that,
apply
yeah.
it to, how it affects us.
Okay. All right. Okay. And I think that really helps to promote some resilience, streamlining process, but then if you're also sort of fine tuning to higher standards, the recharge requirements and, fine tuning how much impervious cover is created. Because that's the other thing, like the subdivision regulations, the roadways, like those roadway widths. You might want to think about those too.
What are the considerations as far as widths go with emergency vehicles and things like that? I guess would be my question.
Yeah, it's important to have a conversation with the emergency personnel to see, what makes sense, because equipment, some towns have equipment that can easily work with narrower streets and others don't.
There has to be a practical compromise. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's worth asking the question, because I think a lot of these standards were put in place long ago when everybody was just doing a certain width. And sometimes you can land an aircraft carrier on some of these subdivision roads. So it might be worth understanding what the equipment that Hatfield uses needs for, turning radius or.
So we're to pave the sidewalks, but not pave anything else.
You limit your
Or you could
impervious. You want to be walkable.
porous pavement on your sidewalks.
Okay.
So it all soaks up. All right. So on the flood side of things, and we'll talk about farmland protection next. On the flood side of things, because you're part of the National Flood Insurance Program, you a while ago adopted a floodplain overlay district with an attendant bylaw in your zoning. And so that needs to be updated to comply with the new firm maps that are in development. I think you just got notices from FEMA about preliminary maps being released just for town review. So the floodplain bylaw needs to be updated to be reflective of that at a minimum. The state is working on guidance because right now it's not entirely clear what the pathway is. Hatfield's effective firm maps date to I think it's 1978. They're really old. And so what this map is showing you is your older FEMA data, the effective firm maps to date, but overlay that is a layer that the engineering consultants were able to get of, and it's kind of hard to see. It's not that legible, but what you're seeing essentially is a fair amount of what had been sort of what was referred to as a 500-year floodplain is now more 100-year floodplain. And so you have a lot more in that sort of special flood area or flood hazard area. So using those old maps to define where your floodplain is a big problem right now. And you can't regulate past it. And what I understand from the state, and I just got guidance last week on this because a lot of people are asking this question, is can a town use mapping that goes beyond that special flood hazard area? And based on the building code, I was told that you can't. The state building code right now, there's draft out for comment. You can only use that. And so I think that's the biggest handicap right now. But there are folks at the state working on that because they understand what a big issue it is. So, in the meantime, we can work with that floodplain bylaw, bring it up to the minimum, and then see where else we might be able to fine tune the dials. The state was supposed to come out with guidance at the end of January on, sort of what more could you do? And there's some examples from some other communities I've been looking at, mostly in Eastern Massachusetts, where they've gone a little beyond as far as they could. So we might, have a conversation about doing some of that if that's helpful. And I think, that's really so I guess some of the things you could do is like really restrict development. I think there's some provisions that allow some development in the floodplain. So you could be really much more restrictive, rather than allowing stuff under special permit. And then greater control on reconstruction or substantial improvements in the floodplain as well. So there's a lot of places where you could increase and reduce risk with new development.
Can I ask a really quick question? Sure. On the map up there,
Yeah,
the area that's marked in pink,
yeah.
what does that represent?
That was let me see, I think that was the 500 there.
Okay, and so I'm focusing on the area that's basically the center of town. There are a number of pins there relative to town hall, the public safety building, post office, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So that was 500 and that's now a 100-year flood area. And I know that, having just worked on one for a town on the other side of the state, I know that there are model bylaws and there's strong recommendations that a flood zone bylaw has to meet now. Do those models recommend restrictions on development within the 100-year flood zone?
The model has a minimum of what you can do.
Okay.
So you can do more. So, but the model is a great place to start.
Okay.
Yeah. And then what we've done is run it by the flood folks at DCR. And then they, say, this is good. Like, this is, legally questionable. Like if you go too far.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, with a sort of point I'm circling around carefully is that if there's a good part of the center of the village area here that's in the 100-year flood area and there's minimum required restrictions to be placed within that area, that's going to be a significant concern. That's going to be something that points to me to be something to strongly focus on.
Yeah.
But with the amount of area that's both in the green, which I assume is the 100-year, the former 100-year, which is probably now a 10-year, whatever, plus the amount of area that's in the pink, the 500, now 100, that's a lot of land. That's a lot of current development that's in those areas.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to mean, depending on what bylaw goes in place, that's going to mean significant restrictions. So it gives me pause.
Yeah. And our committee's been looking at this since last February.
Any conclusions yet from the committee? I mean, Nothing you want to bring up right now.
A lot of concerns.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Just look at this July, how high the water got.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, in July.
And just
Right.
before Christmas too. Hello,
Yeah.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I also look at the contours of the map of the town, and I see a lot of historic oxbows. The Great Pond area, that's where the river used to be.
Yeah.
A lot of
There's
areas.
more water in those areas now than they used to be.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Ground that you could walk on maybe or sink in a little bit. Now there's water.
Yep. Yep. There you go.
Yeah, so I think looking at the floodplain bylaw is probably a really good thing to tackle.
Yeah. I would also think it's going to require a lot of sort of public conversations so people
Yeah.
really understand that this isn't invented, this isn't scare tactics, this is real facts and something we can point to and say, yeah, this is something.
Yeah, and the presentations that the engineers did are all publicly available on the Hatfield 2040 website. So they kind of walk through it. They also show base flood elevations at the different levels at some of the facilities that you're seeing in that area. Yeah. So I think, we probably will not, with the time that we have to invest, bring anything to the point of, and if there needs to be a lot of public conversation around it, we can do our best to give you a marked up version of your bylaw as it is with the discussion we can have before June 30th. And then there'll probably be a next phase, right? Anything else on flood?
Anybody? Good.
Farmland protection. So there were a couple of things that you have in, existing bylaws and regulations. One is a transfer of development rights that allows for certain bonuses for development in receiving areas in exchange for dollars to protect farmland in sending areas. Stephanie was involved in a regional group where we were working on sort of transfer, looking at farmland protection. And part of it was looking at transfer of development rights and where it's working. Like Hadley is making it work because they're offering huge incentives to developers there that end up developing on Route 9, which then enables a town to protect farmlands outside of that Route 9 corridor. The incentives in Hatfield and East Hampton is the other town that has transfer of development rights. The incentives are just not big enough for a developer to say, yeah, let's do this. So what you have on the books is the receiving area, a bonus in the receiving area of 2,000 square feet of additional floor area, plus a 5% increase in building coverage in the business zone. And then there's in the light industrial zone, allows for a bonus in the receiving area of 2% in allowable building coverage for use that involves less than 3,000 square feet of gross building area, or 5,000 square feet of additional gross floor area for use that involves greater or equal than 30,000 square feet of gross building area. So I think there's some good elements in there, but to make it more sort of attractive to developers, there needs to be more there so that they pencil it out and it's really a bargain. What Hadley has done, and tell me if you're familiar with this, but they get that density, that bonus density in square floor area, but because the parking requirements are so high, they get a parking reduction requirement as well. And so it works out really well for a developer, looking at getting both of those elements as part of the transfer of development rights. Also on your books, you have, I understand you're doing an update on the open space development that's going to town meeting, is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. That's great. And then you also have the Agricultural Advisory Commission, which is, I think a great plus. And it seems pretty active, and our group has been working with that group a bunch on this. And we have a chapter in the plan devoted to agriculture and farming because of how important it is to town. So considerations for improvement, certainly encouraging the use of the open space development bylaw. But if you're able to get to a point of making adjustments in the transfer of development rights, that would be a great way to protect farmland. There's a really good example from New Jersey. I think your location, with the interchange of 91, there's a similar town in New Jersey that we looked at when we were doing the earlier work on farmland protection. They did transfer of development rights, and it worked really well because that area around that interchange was so attractive for developers. And so they used a set of trades that really helped them to, increase density there and then protect a lot of farmland further out from that corridor. So I think with the interchange you have on I-91, it's attractive. So that could be one thing you think about on the transfer of development rights. What we did in that work before was we worked on a model agricultural protection overlay district. And it was based on some work that Amherst has done over many years to protect farmland there. So that's available. It's a overlay protection district that would go in your bylaw, in your zoning bylaw. Then out of the farm chapter, they were talking about considering refining the current agricultural zoning to allow for different intensities of farming in the Ag Zone 1 and Ag Zone 2. And they were citing an example from Whately, and I'm not familiar with that. John, do you know what they were talking about? Or?
Are you talking about farming that involves large structures versus farming that's just traditional open field cultivation?
I don't know. I don't know if Whately has something like that on the books.
All
Or...
we know is Jim Galunga brought up, because he farms both Hatfield and Whately, and they were happy with how Whately was set up.
Oh, okay.
And their agricultural density.
Mm-hmm.
So this,
Okay.
For some reason, I can't fathom that, because 40A Section 3 says you can't regulate farming. It's allowable by right. And even uses which don't seem like traditional farming, as long as they're associated with farming, like the construction of a greenhouse, the construction of a vegetable processing plant, whatever, as long as it's part of a farming operation, they're allowed by right. You can't regulate them.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to have to look at the Whately regs to find out
Yeah.
what they're doing.
All right. Sorry, I don't know more on that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Neither do I.
And I saw something in the open space chapter that I also think really, and I just saw this today, is just having a policy, an internal policy for the process when Chapter 61A lands come up for sale or come up for offer for right of first refusal with the town, like defining that. Like that in itself being a piece of work that really, might be able to help the town more swiftly respond to these opportunities that come up. Like, rather than moving toward more regulation, trying to avail yourselves more swiftly of opportunities that come up. Yeah. So I don't know if there's anything on the farming side of things that.
I mean, my only thought on, when you mentioned Hadley and Amherst, I think that you would, if you pick the brain of a lot of people from Hatfield, they would cringe at the thought of this town becoming anything like either of those towns.
Yeah.
So that might not be the way to attack that.
Yeah.
Having said that, also, making bigger boxes to save farmland might not necessarily be the thing for Hatfield either, in my opinion. That might not be the way to preserve farmland for this town, in my opinion.
When you say making bigger boxes.
I'm just, I guess when I hear Hadley, I cringe at the thought of having to go down Route 9 and having that be the central corridor in and out of my town.
Oh, yeah.
And,
yeah.
If we turn the interchange, which you say is attractive, and I don't disagree with that,
Yeah.
you turn that into what they have in Hadley, and all of a sudden you're going through these traffic jams every day. I mean, there's only one way through this town. It's 91 or 5 and 10.
Yeah.
So you have the potentiality of creating unwanted congestion and therefore being a detriment to the town itself, which is my concern.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, and I guess, I was mentioning Hadley because of how attractive they've made it, but it's sort of like there's the cost of that corridor, right? Yeah.
I guess that's the trade-off
Yeah.
that personally I wouldn't want to see.
Yeah.
And maybe a trade-off that doesn't fit this town.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess that's my point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not to speak too long about other places. In West Hampton, we just had a situation where a piece of land that was protected under 61A was sold without the right of first refusal being dealt with. And then 3 weeks later, it was sold again. And only on the second sale did the buyer say, hey, wait a minute, this is still under 61A. It hasn't been released. The lien hasn't been released. The right of refusal hasn't been dealt with. And that was because the town did not have a procedure by which all of the town departments understood how that was, was supposed to be handled. So getting those procedures in place, I think, is huge. Tailing onto that, and I'm looking to you guys because I don't know the answer. Does the CPA have a component for preservation of agricultural land or open space?
I don't know, John. I don't think it really applies like that. I don't think we can.
Wasn't Bob working on something like that? I know he brought up to the Ag Committee. Because
Yeah.
there's some land.
That question is over.
Over under 61A.
Okay.
A few years back. I don't want to specify which properties, but they were saying that, it was 61, whatever. And, if we had funding to work with other land trusts or groups to purchase the land.
Yep.
Because there was some development going on.
I mean, it would certainly be something to look into.
All right. So that sounds like a good thing, like in the internal policy for.
I'm really interested in just the anecdote of what Whately's doing that's making them preferable to farmers, and fleshing that out and seeing if we can do anything. It's accessible because it has to do with agriculture, but still we got to refine it to see if,
Or is there a financial incentive they're able to offer?
what it's all about. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think we got deep into the encouraging open space development bylaw right before you arrived.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's
the
been on
bulk
our
of what we
radar.
were talking about tonight.
I think the board is very cognizant of the fact that this town is lacking in affordable housing. It's lacking in even moderate housing at this point,
Right.
which is hurting our schools. And a town that's aging out we have concerns with aging out, and we have concerns with we have concerns that span everything you talked about here.
Mhm.
You know, it has everything to do with the prosperity of the town.
Mhm.
So, you know, all of these ideals, I think, are things that need to be addressed, and we can appreciate the work you're doing for sure.
Right. Well, and I'd like to credit Marlene and Stephanie when we developed this proposal for flagging these specific areas to be addressed. Yeah.
I think you guys have done a wonderful job in giving us some information, some ideas on where to go, where we need to go, and what we need to get away from.
Yeah.
I think there's some things that are too antiquated for our future reality.
Mhm.
And honestly, maybe some of the motivation we need to move forward on some of these things that have been languishing.
Yeah.
I just want,
Oh, go
or
ahead.
you,
No, I was just going to say, next step, I think what I'll do is I will maybe like report to Stephanie, and then she can let you know at your next meeting, sort of the areas that we hear, you know, tonight as priorities, and then maybe sort of say, here are the things we believe we could tackle with this time, and then just give that back to you for your consideration. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yes.
Okay.
Anybody got anything?
On a personal note, if you happen to find a great internal procedure for right of first refusal, I'd love to see it.
Yeah.
Like a
I will
model
be looking
bylaw.
for
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
Right.
Or a model procedure, model policy, whatever you can be found.
Yep.
Sure. Love to see
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and that might be like, you know, making a few calls and then you have it, you know?
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
We good?
We're good.
Anything else on the agenda?
Got Janelle. Do you?
She did it.
Did you? Okay, because you said I have a lot to talk about this. I don't know if you had anything to say, but for after.
any more thoughts?
Yeah.
I guess what I'm thinking about now, that I'm sure other people are thinking about now, is it feels like we have these two main interests, like help people in town and make more opportunities available in town, but also protect what we've. Yeah, so creating community buy-in of where we're going to create solutions, and like getting people on board that those solutions are worthwhile, I think is the challenge.
I
here.
think we need an educational component here for our town residents to understand what we're talking about, understand the implications of especially of the floodplain
Mhm.
situation and the open space. Also for developing, you know, in a smart way what we have here.
Yeah. 'Cause we want more housing options, but if we're putting them in areas that are going to be at most risk for flood risk, who is that?
It doesn't make any sense.
So that's what I'm thinking about now. But I don't have anything else to add for my updates. So
Anybody like to make any other comments before we close the meeting?
No, I just want to say that I agree with you that the entirety of all of this moving forward has to do with communication to the public, because this town, if nothing else, resists change just at its base. You know, that's the base level of this
Right.
town. We resist change.
Right.
So it has to be something that people know about and see as a positive thing.
So there's a big educational factor here.
Right. Totally.
That we need to have in place with the rest of the town that's not privy to these type of discussions.
That's part of the advantage of the process of the comprehensive plan, though, is that there's a huge public notice, public information campaign that's a significant component of that. And so hopefully by the time that plan is finalized and formalized, and by the time it gets here, a lot of people in the town have already accepted it. And that plan will have specific things. Here's what we're doing. Here's who's responsible for it. Here's the timing of it. Here's the anticipated cost of it. It's literally a roadmap that hopefully the majority of the town has said, okay, this is what we're doing. Hopefully.
I will say when we're thinking about new or like what's going to happen to I-91 in that area with the design guidelines and what we've stated is like our preference, I think we're already ahead, like way ahead of the game versus when Hadley got whatever applications they got for Route 9.
I think the
As a
board
pot-
the board as a whole, I think, has been moving towards development down the Route 5 corridor. It's kind of the only spot in town that we have.
Mhm,
But, I think that we have to be super careful with that development.
mhm. And I,
Stoplights and 4 lanes isn't what we're looking for.
yeah, and I think we are being smart about that. So that's a positive.
Absolutely.
I think that concludes all the things on the agenda for this evening. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Thank
Thank
you
you
very
all for
much.
coming. Thank you all for your information and your hard work in our benefit.